Now, we're going to talk about the use of GenAI in real matters by real lawyers today. What's actually going on out there. And it is no surprise that the very first real use of GenAI, becoming rapidly pretty widespread, is with document review. So for this session, first, here's what we plan to cover: the current state of the use of GenAI for review. But by current state, we don't mean who's offering what tool. We're going to give you a genericized workflow for how this operates. Second and third, the table stakes, the things you really ought to be thinking about when you're trying to figure out whether you're going to do this, what platform you want to use, what capabilities you want to have. And we're going to talk about the emerging capabilities, all, of course, informed and infused by our speakers' experiences, insights, and suggestions. So I'm George Sosha. You've heard from me earlier. I'll be moderating this panel. To my immediate right is Rose Jones, partner at Hilgers. Then, next, Chad Roberts, founder and Discovery Counsel at eDiscovery Counsel. And then at the end, Mike Gaudet, Senior Managing Director, JS Held. So let's jump right into it, because it might seem like we have a lot of time now, but we don't really. This is, and I'll go over a general explanation of this, and then we'll dive into it. As I'd mentioned before, a genericized version of a fairly typical workflow with GenAI technology implemented for document review. Now, the very first point is that every platform you look at is going to have a different workflow. Everyone approaches this a bit differently. They employ different technologies in different ways with different priorities in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. So as you're looking at platforms, don't expect everyone to work just like this. But we've got 5 broad areas. With any of these platforms, one way or another, someone has to create a prompt that goes into the system. Then once you've done that, you want to make sure the prompt actually is going to work fairly well with you, which means there will be probably some sort of 2-stage process. First, an initial calibration stage, where you test that prompt against a smaller number of documents. You don't want to start out by testing it against 5,000 documents, because what if you got it completely wrong? Then if you get to the point where it seems to be working, you might need to go back to an earlier stage and edit it some more. Then you've tested against a larger number of documents through some sort of validation process, where you might be using sampling technologies or something like that to pull together a larger set of data. Once you get the prompt working, you think the way you want to, then it's time to push the run button, whatever that run button happens to look like, and deploy this technology against your discovery documents, the ones you're reviewing. And then ultimately, and importantly, you don't want to forget about this, you then take that output and use it to good effect somehow. So that's a broad description. Comments? Who wants to start first?
Okay, well, I'll kick things off. So for those of us who have been in the eDiscovery profession for a while, most of the review tools are very similar to TAR 1.0, predictive coding. Think of De Silva Moore and the first opinion from Judge Peck. And so a lot of us have done this before, right? The difference here is that it is more powerful. There's opportunity to analyze the data in a much more user-friendly format. For example, the prompting is different, but the overall workflow is very similar in that you take a sample of the documents that you eventually want to analyze using the generative AI. You have humans review those documents, and then you run the AI across that sample set, and then you compare the output to the human review, and then you may say, wow, this part was really great, but it really didn't capture this topic. So I might need to go back and revise my prompt. And when you think of the prompt, think of your review protocol that you would give to your human reviewers. And so you might go back, and that's very similar to a human review, right? So you should be sampling human reviewers' work, and then you get on a call with them and you say, hey, this seems like we're missing this topic. Do we need to have a conversation about that, right? So you go and you have a conversation basically with your prompting, and you update it and you rerun it. And then you get to a point, you look at the precision and the recall, you get happy with those numbers, and then you run it against the entire set. And then it gives you the output, and it says, well, these documents are responsive, these might be in the middle, and we're not sure if they're responsive, they're borderline, and it might give you some output about whether or not, and that they're not responsive. That's a very high level overview, but for those of you who have done this, TAR 1.0, I think it's important to understand that it's a very similar process at this point. I do think that we will eventually, probably quicker than we did previously, get to a point in time where it'll be more like continuous active learning, where the generative AI system just continuously learns as you give it more inputs. We'll get there.
So from the way I heard you describe that, the question comes up, why not just use the supervised learning system I already know? What do I get out of GenAI that I don't get out of that?
I would say the benefits are you get more feedback about why your document might be responsive and why it might not be responsive. And it gives you more insight into the whole data set that you're trying to do. I just wanted to follow up on Rose's comments a little bit. The headlights, for a lot of people, and I don't remember who said this little pithy thing originally and who gets credit for it, but to understand this workflow, it's if you're coming from a generative AI workflow, a traditional machine learning workflow, and you're trying to figure out what all these steps are for and what's happening, is when somebody said in traditional AI, you're training the machine's algorithm. You're training the machine. In this workflow, the machine's training you, all right? Now, once you get that in your head and wrapped around in your head, that I'm being trained and the machine is training me to write a better algorithm, or to write a better prompt, rather, then this workflow makes more sense. So I think the benefits are you get more insight into the data set. As Rose pointed out, if you're a person that's been in this gig for a while, it's a TAR 1 workflow with that exception. And before I forget, there's 2 resources that are in our resource package before we get questions and I forget to say it. If there are only 2 documents I think you could go to, and maybe this panel is a broad brushstroke and you want to get to the next level, is the Tara Emery article on GenAI review work reference model. It's a Sedona conference publication. It's in the data set for this panel. And I think the article that's coming out on validation, no pride of contributing to that, but I think that's those 2 articles would really get someone to a good level of knowledge on how to tackle these things.
I want to unpack something Chad said about having more insight into why a document was chosen as responsive. And what that means is most of the review tools give you a field of information that says, I coded this document responsive because Y, or because of X. It also might link to another document in the data set, so you can go back and compare. And after Stephanie's presentation today, I'm thinking about exporting all of those so she can put them in an Excel and give me a pivot. So I'm going to call you about that. But it really gives you insight into why I call them tiny human reviewers. That's what I call them, because that's what they are. It really is somebody Like it thinks like a human. And we used to joke around. We used to get calls on a Friday that would say, "Hey, we need to review, 50,000 documents by next Tuesday." And my partner and I at the time, John Tucker, we would joke. We were like, "Do they think we just have like humans sitting on a shelf that we could just, have them?" Well, we now do. We actually have that now. We have tiny humans inside the AI that can go in and review these documents, and it's the opportunity is very promising. And so, anyways, I don't want to get on my soapbox about how exciting.
And I call them review bots. I make them very unhuman. Unlike Rich Robinson, I want to blow all the humans out of the loop. The humans are cranky. They need to be fed. They're kind of outdated. No, humans need to obviously supervise, but I think to what's been discussed, the reason there's so many iterations, if you follow all the arrows in this chart, you're constantly making it better. And the thing that the GenAI does that's new this decade versus last decade is you have way better feedback to tweak and make it better. Rather than going, well, there were too many yeses, or there are not enough yeses, and wondering why. Now you read the descriptions and you go, oh, the review bot didn't understand what I wanted. And looking at this chart, I think it's kind of funny because there's lots of boxes here, right? But what box?
This was put together by the guy who put together the EDR.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
The SOCIA some other guy report, right?
Yeah.
Model.
Godfather of the EDRM.
Now the first box here, George, is what the funny one, because I think this is what trips up a lot of people, right? Create prompt. People stare at the screen. And this is kind of interesting because when I was running this on a new project last year, working with a law firm. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so at the risk of offending all of the good lawyers in this room and future lawyers are very smart, and they're very good at what they do. And prompts are a new thing. So I was working with a lawyer that she knew the case inside and out. She knew the issues, and I said, I need you to write a prompt. And she said, I'm not going to do that. I don't know how to do that. And I said, well, we have to do it to kind of kickstart the machine. And she had what we call prompt fear now, right? It's real.
Prompt fear, it's like, let's call it something else then. Like, ask me the question that you want me to ask the document.
Right. Well, the funny thing was, so I was like, all right, I'm going to take a shot, having talked to her, understanding the issue. And then once I took a draft and gave it to her, she made it way better and edited it. She kind of needed to see that first input on the screen. Also, there's the whole, all right, there's 27 issues on the case, and we need to get it down to 10, based on whatever platform you're using. We need to kind of consolidate and rework. So there's that aspect of it. But creating the prompt is really one of the most, and I know it's probably been said a lot in this conference, one of the really important skills, and you referenced some of the materials. I put an article I really liked from legalprompts.com that came out, I think, just a week or two ago. It's in the materials for this. And I like it because it has guidance on what are good things that you should do as far as defining the role, who am I, looking at the docs, the context, defining the tasks, what I would like an output to look like, and what I don't want back. And those things, I think the more prompts you write, the better you get at those. But this article has lots of examples. And what I've noticed with prompts on the few projects I've run GenAI on is a lot of times you don't know that last part, the restrictions, what don't I want, until it comes back. And you go, oh, I wanted everything related to this drug from my pharmaceutical client, but not the marketing materials. But I forgot to say, but not the marketing materials in the first part of the prompt. So you're constantly going back. And the reason why box or column 2, you calibrate on a small set, and then 3, you validate on a slightly bigger set, is because you don't want to run up the bill until you get the prompt kind of humming. And that's kind of the first few columns of this workflow.
So there are a rapidly growing number of platforms that offer these capabilities. Every one of them, one way or another, starts with some sort of create prompt function. Do all those create prompt functions with the different platforms you've seen look alike and operate the same way?
They do not. I have tested several, and they are all different. Some give you full autonomy into how you create the prompt. Some say, no, I don't need you to tell me how to code for privilege or prompt for privilege, because we've got that down. And so some are like, I want you to give this the full coding protocol that you would give to a privilege reviewer, somebody on the privilege team. So from my experience, they are all very different on the prompting. I personally prefer having more insight into the prompt process. I think it's important
What does that mean, insight into the prompt
So I want
process?
to be able, so if I give the engineers or the technology advisors the coding protocol and they say, I have to go revise this so that the technology can understand what you're trying to say, I want to see how they're revising it. I want to see what they're actually inputting into the system. And I think that's very important as a lawyer to be able to see that so you can tweak, because there is, there could be a knowledge gap, there could be a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of what you're trying to get to. So the human in the loop is, I'm going to side with Rich, I'm sorry. The human in the loop is
the human in the loop
most
is important, but it's helpful to have the tech further guide. And I know our presentation is called Table Stakes and Advanced Options. So the vanilla chart could be table stakes, right? Every tool needs this. Some of the advanced options, I feel, come into play in the prompt writing.
Should we jump to that slide? Because we just
Well,
have
I think it's,
slides.
isn't it the same slide? It's the same slide, right?
Before we jump to that slide, we'll
okay.
finish.
Yes.
So I want to just say too, this is just for like responsiveness.
Right.
There are other workflows, right?
Right.
So you got to review for privilege. You have to review for issue codes. Maybe you have to look for PII and PHI. And so this is just like a very basic, how do you get the responsive? There's so many other opportunities that we've been leveraging, machine translations and things of that nature that also can be very powerful in these workflows.
To George's question of do they all look the same, I think one of the reasons they don't is a lot of them just give you kind of a big blank screen that's kind of daunting, and they go, insert prompt here and click this button. But what I'm seeing now with different tools is more coaching of that prompt, saying suggestions of, oh, this is overly broad, or add the context here. When I first did this, I said I took credit for writing the prompts. I actually used ChatGPT, right? So, Stephanie was talking about how some tasks don't need AI, right? You can do some great things in Excel. You don't need to go to ChatGPT to some Excel tab or Excel quantities. I'm suggesting sometimes your AI needs AI to further help it. And I think where this is going is the table stakes is kind of at the bare minimum having this, but then as these tools evolve, rather than me copying my prompt to ChatGPT, making it better, and then coming back to whatever eDiscovery tool I was using, wouldn't it be great if the eDiscovery tool let me do it within that? Because it's such an important part of the process. I feel more and more I'm going to be having to go to less places to kind of refine, and the tools themselves will help you tweak.
And if I could just add on, there's tools and then there's tools, and do you get different results? And this is also a pitch for validation and the heightened importance of validation for these kinds of workflows. This is a predictive model at the end of the day. It is, as the wonks say, non-deterministic. If you were doing an old-fashioned machine algorithm, theoretically, if you took the same 10,000 documents and indexed them, and you coded a subset of them the very same way, and you did that in 2 independent instances of your platform, you should get the exact same mathematical computation of what the predictive values are. That is not the case with these tools. So if you follow the chatter of the people that build these things, they're constantly talking about, well, a new version came out, and we're going to that new version. And there's a competitor version that came out. We're going to that version. So even in the same box, theoretically, if you give it the same prompt 3 times, you will likely get 3 different answers at the end of the day.
So
and
if you were to say, not hypothetically, and I don't remember the exact numbers, take, say, 36 documents and give them to 10 reviewers, and have the 10 reviewers review those 36 documents 2 times back to back, you will not get the same results.
I get it.
And I love that point, and that was the point I was going to make.
Yes.
The probabilistic nature of this makes
coming.
it more like a human review. It makes,
Right.
I mean, and that's what I think we have to wrap our brains around, is like the technology is to a point where it thinks like a human.
Here comes our first hard,
Including changing its mind.
here comes our first hard question.
I was asked to throw curveballs, not soft.
Here we go.
All right.
Okay.
So Chad, you brought something up, and I think it's actually worth everybody in this room thinking about just for a moment, right? So there's lots of sources of, you use the word non-deterministic. Some people will say stochastic, but basically the model will give you a different answer even when it's given the exact same input. And that can, we're trying to address the fear. That can cause fear for some people.
Right.
But there's actually a lot of different sources of that non-determinism, and it's worth just talking about a couple of them and making sure we're separating them. So one is this concept of temperature, where the model, you deliberately introduce randomness into the model, and that actually most vendors will just turn it completely off. Then there's another source, which is sort of like the underlying parallel computations, and that one is like hard. Most people haven't figured it out. And so when you put in the same input, you will get different outputs despite everything else. And this has been measured. People have talked about it. I won't go into that. But there's a third source, and you actually alluded to that, and it's actually worth talking about, and that is the model upgrade process itself. So you're sitting in front of your favorite technology tool, whatever it is. It's Monday, and you type in something, and it goes in, and on the back end, it's running against a prompt and an LLM and some other code that was written by your vendor or provided by your vendor. And then on Tuesday, your vendor changes.
Update.
They do an update. So the question back to the group is, how important is it that you know that your vendor has made a change? How much control do you want in terms of saying, hey, don't do that, or give me some time? Like, what's the appropriate notice period for an upgrade, which would potentially sort of remove the previous version being available to you to run in the future?
And the change could theoretically be a wholly different LLM possibly being used.
So I would want to know immediately. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I need to know that, right?
Yeah.
I need to know that there's a change.
You need to know immediately, before they do it. Not, we changed it yesterday.
Like, I need, not the day before, but like, if you are rolling out a new version that's going to significantly change my workflow, I need to be made aware of that in advance so that we can have a conversation to understand, do we want to implement that when we're in the middle of a review or a production, or do we want, how do we leverage it? How do we bring it in so that we, are doing it in a way that we all feel comfortable with?
And can we selectively turn it on or off in different databases if one's already pretty far down?
And the other reason is, how we started off with that thing that the machine's training you, it's not training, you're not training the machine, that machine's training you. If they swap out a different LLM engine under the hood, everything you sort of intuitively, empirically learned about how to write a good prompt could take a little bit of a turn to the left or a turn to the right? So it kind of can kick off a new little learning curve of your own that way. And so these are just things under the hood that are things to be mindful about and make sure that people are mindful.
Yeah, and addressing the fear question, I feel like that's the biggest thing a lot of us in this room have to do, like assuage fears, right? That could be the title of our session as well, overcoming fears. So a lot of times when I'm first introducing the idea of GenAI to a law firm that might not have used it yet, some of the comfort I give, because there's this big worry that it's a black box and I don't understand what's going on. And some of it will always be, you're not going to know every step in the process, the predictive algorithms of the AI. But I show any reporting features I can show them on any of these tools. And I think those are continually evolving. So if you ask a question Monday and you ask the same question Friday, you might get a different answer even without an update in the software. But if it's like a chat-based AI, I'll show them, here's where you can export your full list of questions historically into an Excel, and you can have a report. And they kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, that data's not lost. And in this workflow, where the arrows keep circling and there's lots of runs, you might run GenAI 20 times. And the results change each time. And some people, and I kind of have this part of my brain too, you're like, well, what if run 17 was better than run 20? How do I know it was getting better, right? I like to be able to report on the metrics of each run and go back into it. So I think that's part of the evolution too, reporting kind of not only giving you the final answers, but how did you get there? It makes it feel a little bit more understandable and reportable, and help people overcome that fear.
Rose and I were trying to find something to fight over before the panel just to get the room energy up.
We're old friends, so we like to fight. We're on the opposite side of the V most of the time.
And we both went to Georgia Tech too, so that's a little thing. So, yeah.
Go Jackets.
Yeah, man.
Ooh.
Yeah, man. So, another was that one different worldview we kind of have apparently is this approach to a constructive risk management thing. And I'm all about scaring the dickens out of people, man. I'm all into it. I am more reassured if I go to the pilot of the airplane and I go, could something bad happen on this flight? And they go, oh yeah, something bad could happen on the flight. But hey, here's my checklist. We got a plan for everything. So, here are the 5 most common things that could probably happen to kill everybody. I'm like, okay, I feel better. That's me, right? Rose has a different concern that when you go overboard doing that, there could be other consequences when you go a little overboard with that approach. And I thought it was meritorious.
Well, I feel that the best way to overcome fear is to face it head on. And something that Judge Grimm articulated very well this morning is education is the most important piece of this. And so, yes, we should understand that there are risks involved, and we should understand that it's going to be challenging, but at the same time, we have to learn about this. It is not going away. It is in every part of our lives, and it is not just in the legal profession. It is happening within the business. Our children are using generative AI to write papers, and they're being instructed to do so by their teachers. So this is the way of the future. And I know Scott said that generative AI is not going to replace lawyers, but I disagree. I feel like we're going to get to a point where we have to figure out new ways to become valuable to our companies, because there are going to be opportunities to leverage generative AI in a way that minimizes the number of resources that we are required to have on a day-to-day basis. It's the the best way to face that is to accept it and then learn the technology and figure out how you can bring value to your company. And it's not just global corporations, it's small law firms. To me, it's from the solo practitioners to the largest firms in the world. And again, I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight, but it is going to happen.
Excuse me, an online question.
Okay.
2 online questions, really. The first one is, GenAI is known for trying to please or satisfy the user rather than providing straightforward answers at times. What suggestions do you have to help search results be more accurate over an answer that may seem satisfactory or pleasing? And then the next question is, and this may be part of the presentation going forward, how do you pick a good calibration document set? And what method and how many documents?
I can take a shot at both of those.
Yeah, please.
So for the first one, I think it comes down to writing the prompt. So pleasing the user is a good thing if the AI knows who the user is and what the user is after. If you give it a generic prompt, you're going to get a generally pleasing answer that might not be good in your context. So when you go to write your prompt, if you say, you are a fraud investigator, looking through these documents, trying to find evidence of financial fraud, you kind of give the background of what the AI is supposed to be doing, and you say, I want an output and a timeline broken down by month. And so the more specificity you give in the prompt, I think the more you avoid that first problem of it, kind of trying to please the masses based on its LLM training. It's going to please your prompt. And you guys,
Before you go on, a footnote on that.
Yeah.
You want to know your platform well. Does it already have a built-in persona?
Right. Or the temperature.
Has it been essentially trained to be a really high quality reviewer?
Yeah.
And is that who you're dealing with initially?
And it might take a couple iterations. Yeah. It's going to take a few iterations anyway. You kind of have to get over that. It's never going to be right the first time. And then on the calibration question, I think that's a really good question. So I don't know, George, if you want to go back to the last slide, the second column there. I think the answer differs based on the kind of case you're on. So sometimes it's good to get a more general calibration set where it's somewhat random, but actually Again, we're kind of table stakes versus advanced options. Some of the tools now are helping you pull the calibration set based on likely responsive docs and likely non-responsive docs. So you want some good yeses and you want some good nos in the calibration set. So I think that's generally good advice for a calibration set, to the extent that you know what documents might be yeses and nos up front for the human review. But there's a workflow for if your data set is not rich, kind of the needle in the haystack case, where you don't have a whole lot of responsive docs. Let's say you load 1 million docs and you think there might be 10 of the one you're looking for. If you take a random sample of 1 million docs, you're not going to find a good representation of those 10. So in those situations, I think it's actually worthwhile to do some more preliminary searching to try to see what docs might be the yeses, because you want a calibration set with some yeses in there. Otherwise, you're kind of doomed to failure. So I think it's kind of a long-winded answer, but how you build your calibration set, that strategy, is going to differ depending on the type of case and the richness of your data set.
Yeah, and I think it depends too. I like to use multiple samples. So the first one is a true random sample. So you ask the system to just say, I've got 5,000 documents, give me 100 random documents, and it knows how to automatically do that. But there's also something called a stratified random sample, where the computer will look at all your documents and say, I've got maybe these 30 concepts. So I'm going to make sure that I pull a sample from each of these concepts. And so both of them give you different data points and different metrics that you can track throughout your entire workflow to help you, to guide you just through the process, which I won't go into the details of that. But both of them are helpful. And in my opinion, I think both should be used when you're looking at calibrating and this is just standard statistics and sampling. This isn't new. This is something that has been going on since well before I was born. It's just, we're starting to really apply an engineering lens to the legal profession, so it seems new to everybody.
And what you're talking about too, Rose, is particularly important in column 3, validate, right, for the precision and recall metrics.
Yes.
To have random.
So we've got a question there, but did we have a second part to the online audience question that did not yet get answered?
Yes, just following up on the precision and recall, we've got a question on that. What is the level of precision and recall for review bots when given a perfect review protocol prompt? And will they return the same document sets when rerun multiple times? And if not, how varied are those results?
Unknown and very varied. I think the kind of, when people are aiming for recall, we're typically shooting for 80%, right? I feel like that's kind of, but it varies obviously by project.
80%, but the case law that's out there about TAR and TAR 1.0, it's like 70%, 75% when you look at all of it together. So I'm just saying that's the case law out there. But the the GenAI recalls that I'm seeing are in the 90s. Like it's very high.
And I was going to say, it's actually, I think it's better at recall than it is at precision. And sometimes that's the opposite of what I want. So at JSL, we do a lot of cases that are investigations where we don't need to produce every responsive doc. We need to load 1 million docs and figure out what the heck was going on. When did the CFO know about the fraud, or whatever the case may be. So I don't need every single doc. I just want to give my investigatory team good, meaty documents to learn quickly in the first week. So again, now we're talking, table stakes versus advanced options. Some tools now are building in for these iterations. When do you stop, right? You keep going back and forth. How do you know you're done? After 20 runs, 30 runs, if you get this many docs? Some of them are building into the UI, I want it to run until I get this recall or this precision or both. And in some of our investigations, I'd rather a precise set of docs and then hand that to either the legal team or the fraud investigation team and say, look, here's 5,000 docs. I'm pretty sure that these are going to be, important docs to help you further the investigation.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the question about variability. And this is something you can test, and we've done it. We, take a set of data, run the same set of data with the same set of prompts through 5 times. Everything exact. And what we found is that the deviation was about 1%. recall was like just over 1, precision was less than 1. And so we had a 99% confidence rate. So when you're asking questions about variability, you don't want to say to a court, there's a lot of variability. You want to say, we've tested these tools and these models, and we're able to give you a statistical reporting of what that variability is. And the actual comment I wanted to say, sorry, when you're asked about the, GenAI, it's meant to give you an answer, it wants to please you, et cetera. The tools that we're using in Discovery are not built to give you an answer just because it needs to give you an answer. Like if the AI isn't sure if a document is relevant or not, it won't give you an answer. It might say it needs further review, it might error. And I think one of the things that we've missed in education is that piece, that we have those built-in guardrails. We're not letting GenAI just give you an answer. We have requirements and rules built into the prompting, and if you can't meet those rules, it's not going to give you an answer. And that's how we, reduce hallucinations, and we don't, aim to please and get 100% perfect, set of responses. You might get 5% of your data set that isn't classified by GenAI, and that's because it has to be looked at by a human. So I think when you focus on, the real statistics and you really get into it, those are the answers we're going to have to go to, with the courts. So.
And I
love that view. Can I just say, I love that viewpoint. And also that was Esther Birnbaum. And if you guys want to know the latest and greatest about document review today, go to her LinkedIn post. It's pretty interesting.
And I think, Esther, you said like 5%, maybe it doesn't know. I think one of the evolutions I've seen in only the year or so of GenAI, year plus, is one of the original biggest problems I thought was the maybe pile, as I call it, right? Which is you would run this and it's not cheap, and we're all trying to make it cheaper, but you'd spend $100,000 of the client's money perhaps, and then 25-30% of the docs are in the maybe pile, and you go, well, we're not sure if they're yes or no. We got to run it again. So part of this validation loop is trying to reduce the maybe pile by kind of honing in on the prompt. And I think the tools are getting better at that from what we've seen in testing.
And I love the point that you made on the investigation, because it's an opportunity to show that there's different workflows. You don't have to use this model, right? You can interrogate the data. There are other workflows in these review tools. And I really think it's important to understand the review tools that were built for purpose, that were built for document review, are so much more advanced than the thousands of technologies that are out there that are being created, overnight by someone not in the legal profession, that someone who knows nothing about legal, right? And they're building these technologies. So I just want to make it clear, you have to be very careful. But for the folks that have been doing this forever, and those are the eDiscovery professionals, they've created workflows that are very bespoke to document review. And the GenAI capabilities for interrogating the data in an investigation are incredible. And so basically what that means is you don't have to run these prompts. You can just go in and ask it a question like you were given it a deposition. So I want to know, for the investigation, who was talking about this and on what date? Right? And so I think that's just a great example of another workflow.
And then I just want to warn you, time is already running short.
Oh, sorry.
So we do need to turn to table stakes and capabilities as well. Before we get to that, one of the things we elided over is what you typically get out of these systems. Typically, you get some sort of a rating or ranking or numerical value, some indication of whether or not it's responsive or how responsive the system thinks it might be. Second, typically you get a reason. And then sometimes you get citations to the sources it used to deliver the reason. There are a variety of systems. They have a variety of forms of output, but those are fairly typical. Now, you were going to comment.
I was going to say, for the folks that are joining us remotely, and for the project managers out there, don't think for a minute your job's at risk because of this. Your job is, the world's collapsing to your job, is how I would think about it. If you're just document review, you're probably maybe more vulnerable, but people, there is going to be a premium on people that can drive this workflow and understand it. And the other thing that goes with it is, we were here talking about what's going on in the real world. In the real world, the traditional tools are still always being used in these workflows. In other words, it's not like people are abandoning machine learning and going straight to generative AI. It's still expensive. The price will change and the workflow will change in a year. But, traditional machine learning is very, very economical. And so people in practice are doing combinations of, let me do my training on my machine learning corpus with a good kickstart from generative AI, very efficient, maybe one or two subject matter expert lawyers. They leverage that over to the machine learning module, and then just sort of cascade with different tools. So if you're a project manager, it's going to put a premium on how dexterous you are, if that's the right word, how much dexterity you have to move among the different tools and workflows and get the right tool for the right job.
So I'm giving you a time check now. We have 9 minutes left. We need to cover something about table stakes and capabilities. So first, table stakes. Who's going to go run at that?
We talked about some of these.
Well, yeah. The system's got to run.
We
right?
haven't really mentioned, about it kind of goes without saying that we're talking about purpose-built platforms that keep it in a closed domain and not in a public domain. And Rose's comments are, don't take that for granted. Usable.
Aspirational, perhaps. Still.
Usable by somebody, not everybody.
Yeah.
Project managers, your job is not at risk. I'll put it that way in terms of how usable it is.
I do think that whether or not it's affordable is still a big topic, right?
Yeah.
So it is not without cost to run the generative AI technology. Some review platforms are including it in the pricing, so you have access to it up to a certain limit. So I think, again, just making sure you understand what your allotment of leveraging the generative AI for the current workflow that you have, making sure you understand that so you can apply it to the appropriate data set, because the worst thing you can do is run documents that don't have text or things that aren't conducive through that, right? And then you're wasting.
Bottom line is there's a cost to using it.
Yes.
Someone has to pay that cost somehow.
Yeah, I think the big one on here is security, right? People are worried about the confidentiality of their clients' data. So in all these scenarios of the tools we're talking about, the data is encrypted. It's encrypted at rest and encrypted in transit to the LLM and back. And all of the service providers swear on a stack of Bibles that they're not using your data to train anything, right? But I don't know it might be interesting to hear who out there is at a firm that doesn't allow any AI, even in an eDiscovery tool. And I talk to a lot of firms.
Exists anymore.
I talk to firms still like that, where the InfoSec department reviews, how one of these big eDiscovery platforms is using AI, and they say it's not in line with firm policy because it's all a closed garden system, and we can't be sure what's happening to our data. And I know the lawyers at those firms are sometimes banging their heads on the wall going, come on, everybody's using it. And I think that will evolve, but it's easy to think that because we're all using it, right, and a lot of firms are out there using it, not every firm has accepted the minimum security threshold to move forward.
I think they're going to have to. I mean, going back to Rich's point when he was saying they're, corporations are updating their outside counsel guidelines. I have received updated outside counsel guidelines that say you must use generative AI for X, Y, and Z. It's not like, how are you using it, or are you going to use it? Tell me, you have to use it. So I think the thought that law firms can, again, not face it head on, that's in the past. We have to be moving forward and how we can leverage it.
We have an online question along those lines. And the online question is, with a corporation with the power of GenAI to obtain 90% recall, why would a company want to use human reviewers instead of AI reviewers?
Go ahead.
Money. Yeah, money.
That's why I think we're going to very soon be to where we have majority of the first pass review is going to be done by generative AI.
Yeah, I think the answer is you need some human reviewers to verify the validity of that 90% coming back, but you don't need nearly as many as you used to have.
So I mean, the ultimate deliverable is you go to your collections and you get data sources reasonably likely to contain responsive information. You get 1 million documents, and you want to be able to tell a judge 6 months later, these 850,000 documents are never going to see the light of day, and nobody's ever going to look at them. And then everybody's going to go, well, that's strong. Can you back that up? And can you back that up? And the savings are what we're looking for. I mean, that's what's driving this.
And I think what's different than before, the clients are saying you need to do it, as opposed to me going to my clients and saying, I really think you should try predictive coding. It's this new cool thing back in 2010. I have clients coming to me and saying, I want you to start using.
We have one more hard question. Another hard one.
You got to have the mic.
Just a quick comment on maybe 3 things to kind of think in addition to these table stakes. So one, encrypts data, keeps data confidential, data retention. So know how long data is not, or where it is and how long it stays there. That's one. 2, this change management that I sort of talked about, like is the model changing under your feet? Do you know, how is it communicated? Is it something that's acceptable to you? And then not up here, but actually really important, I think for many people, is the speed of the service. Right. So when you put it in, many of us are used to TAR, where basically the results come back almost instantly. Right. It's not true for generative AI, and just knowing how fast that service is and whether that meets your need is another thing to just be aware of.
And that speed's increasing a lot. I feel like in the last year, multi-threading calls to the LLMs to get the results back faster. But that is kind of like a sticking point that it has been the speed. And cost is the other big one. And I just want to say something quickly on cost. Like where I see the trend going as far as advanced options is kind of this hybrid of TAR and GenAI. So in the past, I think any consultancy or litigation support provider has kind of juggled that manually, saying, okay, we're going to do this much GenAI, then we're going to put it in TAR. So you can either, as Chad mentioned, use GenAI to kickstart TAR to go review more docs at a lower cost. Or I've done a workflow where we've used TAR to sort of stratify the likely responsive docs and had GenAI only look at the top X%, therefore reducing the cost. So I think that you got to kind of make a hybrid workflow where you're not putting GenAI pointing it at millions of docs. And I think where the tools are going is a lot more of that is going to be built into the tool rather than having consultants like me going, okay, we're going to go from here to here and then copy back. I think you're going to kind of set some of these levers and switches and say, all right, we want to run GenAI on this %. We want to run TAR till it gets to this recall, then kind of report back and show us how far you got.
And as a requesting party working with plaintiffs' law firms, I think I just heard that 95% recall is a new baseline. I don't know about y'all. That's what I heard.
You're not getting a laugh out of me on that one, Chad. That's not the new standard.
That was a drive-by with 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I know. So our time has flown by. You've got 2 minutes left between the 3 of you to give your 3 takeaways. You can expand a little bit on the words on the screen. And let's just go down the line. Rose? Yeah,
no, I mean, again, as I've said before, it's really exciting. There are a lot of opportunities, but you have to proceed with caution. And it's something that there are risks involved. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And so it's not that first pass review is going to be gone forever, but there's certain low-hanging fruit. It's a common terminology that we're using that might be like going forward, you can use it for those types of data sets, right? So it's more about thinking about the opportunities and how you can enhance your process.
If you're a plaintiff's lawyer or a requesting party, you really need to understand what they're doing, because your proportionality calculus is changing. If it's more efficient for them, then theoretically you should get a more expansive scope of discovery.
Can I respond? to
Yes, you can, yes.
that? Chat. Yeah, I don't think so. Again, I don't agree with chat.
Okay, all right.
I was going to go back to revisit what some of the previous panels said, which is start with the problem, not the solution. So rather than saying, hey, we'd like to try AI, one of the ways I got to use this first was I was talking to counsel who had an aggressive deposition schedule coming up. And I said, you've got 50,000 docs to review by next week and you can't do it. And then she was like, well, what can we do to expedite the process? And I was like, well, I just might have a solution here. So start with the problem and then introduce this as a solution and make it sort of a manageable set first. And then you can show the results. I think Angela on the last panel said, don't just talk about it, show it. So run the tool, show the attorneys, okay, this is kind of what you can get out of it, and then you're off and running.